is why you should always lock your front doors. A kid living with both of his parents decided to watch a movie for their family weekly movie night. He then gets up to use the restroom. As he is in the restroom, he sees all of the power in the house cuts off, and then he hears 2 loud thumps. He locks the bathroom door and hears heavy objects being dragged across the hallway. The kid, freaking out, runs out of the bathroom and runs into the restroom. Once he is inside the room, he locks the door. As he locks the door, he jumps in bed and acts like he's asleep in hopes that this person who is in the house will ignore a child sleeping. He closes his eyes and hears the door creak at the same time. He squints his eyes and sees a man with no eyes dragging the bodies of both of his parents. The man dragging his parents sits his mom's dead body in a chair facing him, and then sets the dad's body on the floor facing up. It was almost like whoever was in the house who killed them wanted him to see it. He then sees the man writing something on the wall and then climbs under his bed. He laid there for hours knowing that if he moved a muscle, he would end up just like his parents. He finally built up enough courage to read the wall, and the writing on the wall said,
Storytime. So once upon a time in grade 5, I was going through this really strange phenomenon where like 5 of my adult teeth decided to all come in at once. Now I already had this really weird obsession with when I had a loose tooth, I loved to like pluck it out of my face like berries off of a vine. So as you can imagine, sitting there with 5 loose teeth in my mouth felt like I was in an orchard on a hot summer's day. My brothers had just rewatched The Exorcist with me a few nights before while babysitting. So its cinematic masterpiece was still ever fresh in my mind as I sat there not listening to my teacher drone on about numbers, secretly popping my teeth out with my tongue and letting my mouth fill with blood. Till I noticed my dear old classmate Tristane, who used to eat rulers and pick on me, was staring at me. So I looked him dead in the eyes, opened my mouth slowly and let all of the teeth and blood just dribble out onto the desk. Then I said in a low grumble, "You will die tonight." He started screaming and then I had to go to church.
My mom got pregnant many years ago after she married my dad, and they were both overjoyed to have a daughter. After my birth, they were waiting anxiously for me when the nurse walked in, looking nervous. I'm not sure if you want to see her. Oh my God. Is she ugly? I'm going to have a heart attack if she's ugly. I think she's a dwarf. Mom leapt forward and took me from the nurse, and Dad stared at me in horror. I was really tiny and ugly, like a frog. I'll have you fired, you moron. I don't care what my daughter looks like. She's mine, and she's beautiful. So what if she's a bit small? But as years went by and my progress was monitored by doctors, I was diagnosed with slower growth than most people, which meant I'd always look younger than I actually am. Mom didn't care, as long as I was healthy. But Dad...
Storytime. There was this one time in the 6th grade during gym class I was telling my friend some stupid story about elementary school. After I finished talking, I realized she wasn't even fucking listening, so I turned around and looked at her and called her a bitch. Then this ugly-ass popular girl turns around and screams, "Did you just call me a bitch?" I turned to face her and I was like, "I wasn't even talking to you, I'm talking to my friend." Then she gets in my face and says, "Stop lying, I know you called me that because you're jealous of me." After she put her nasty-ass smelly mouth in my face, she ran off to tell her little squad everything. After class finished, one of the girls came up to me and said, "If you're gonna talk about my friend like that, we're gonna have a problem." So I screamed back in this bitch's face and said, "I already told your friend that I wasn't even talking to her and I wasn't even facing her directions."
This is why you should never watch TV late at night. Once a mother and a father decided they needed a break, so they planned a night out together, and they left their 2 children with their babysitter at home. Everything was going good, the children were well behaved, and the babysitter was just sitting around while watching the kids, but eventually she decided that she wanted to watch some TV. It turns out she couldn't watch it downstairs because they didn't have cable downstairs, so she called the parents and asked if she could watch TV with the kids in their room upstairs. The parents agreed. They were about to hang up the phone when the babysitter had one final request. As she entered the parents' bedroom, she asked if she could cover up their large clown statue with a cloth or a blanket. She said it was making her very uncomfortable. The phone line went dead for a second. Then the mother said over the phone, "Take the children and get out of the house. We don't have a clown statue." As the babysitter turned around, she saw the corners of the clown's mouth widen into a smile.
But for the first time in a really long time, I actually had something scary happen to me last night. So I was up really late because my boyfriend's in Vegas and their time difference is 2 hours behind. And he goes to bed really late. So for the past few days, I've been staying up till 4 a.m. until he falls asleep. So last night I decided I wanted to get some food, a late night snack. And at this point, I think it's like 2 a.m. And in my basement, I hear some rumbling and fumbling. But nobody's down there. Everybody's asleep. I don't have any pets. My dog's dead. I don't have any pets. So I'm in the kitchen listening, and my kitchen is right here, and like the stairs to the basement is right there, and like my house is low-key empty, so you could hear everything. And I start hearing little whispers. A little. So I'm sitting there eating my snack, and I hear that shit, and I pause the YouTube video I was watching, and I start hearing footsteps come upstairs. So I sat in my backyard for the rest of the night, up until like 3 a.m., and then I went inside and went to bed.
In elementary school, it was lunchtime. A bitch had to go potty. It was poo-poo time. So I remember I went to the restroom and I was exploding or whatever. And these girls walked in. We're gonna call them the Chipettes, okay? This is the best part. So the Chipettes start yelling in the bathroom. Is someone here? Can someone hear me? Like, I didn't say anything. I was literally taking a shit. Like, what? These girls, deadass, start laughing. They turn off the lights in the bathroom. They turn on all the sinks, whatever. And they start saying like Bloody Mary or some shit. And then the Chipettes run out of the bathroom and shut the door. So here I am getting casted on. I remember seeing a shadow. I fell on my ass and I start screaming and crying. It wasn't good. So someone called the janitor. Janitor walks in to check up on me. It's a guy.
Story time about how a stranger wandered into my house and it led to something amazing. I woke up one night to someone ringing my doorbell over and over vigorously. I looked at the clock and I saw it was 3 in the morning. I went to the door and looked out of the peephole and saw a young woman outside on my porch. I opened the door and could immediately tell that she was intoxicated. She started explaining to me that she was at a bar down the street and lost her phone. That's when she asked if she could use mine and call someone for a ride home. It was freezing outside, so I reluctantly let her in. She asked me for water, so I led her to the kitchen. She proceeded to open my fridge and start eating my lunch meat and various other snacks. She then kicked off her heels and sat down at the table with a jar of pickles and started talking to me like she's known me for years. She told me her name was Krista and asked me how work was and what I was up to tomorrow. I reminded her that she needs to call someone to come pick her up and handed her my cell phone. She took the phone and FaceTimed her brother. She told him that she needs a ride but she has no idea where she's at and handed me the phone to talk to him. I told him the situation and gave him my address to come pick her up ASAP. A few seconds later, my doorbell began ringing again and someone started banging on my door. I went to the door and opened it to find a guy outside and he looked furious. This is when things got intense.
This girl literally lived a nightmare. A 17-year-old girl was watching TV late at night when her motion detector lights in her driveway suddenly went on. She assumed it was just an animal, so she got up, drew the blinds, and went back to watching TV. Then a little bit later, it happened again. Before she could even react, she looks over and clearly makes out a silhouette of a person right behind the blinds who starts banging aggressively on the window. The girl stands up and goes, "I'm gonna call the cops!" And the figure stops for just a second, sprints to the side door and starts pounding even louder on that, screaming incoherently. The girl runs to the bathroom, barricades herself inside while she waits for the police, and then her worst nightmares come true. She hears glass shatter in the other room. After a few minutes of silence, she opens her door just a crack to get a peek outside, and standing in her living room next to a broken window is some crazy old woman who looks over at her and starts sprinting toward her. The lady comes smashing into the door and starts wailing on it until the police arrive and take her away. She was a lunatic who had escaped her facility.
A little girl brought her pet hamster to the vet because it wasn't moving or eating anything for 3 whole days, and you're never gonna guess why. According to the little girl, all the hamster had done for the last 3 days was sit on the side of the cage, wouldn't move, wouldn't eat or drink or anything. When the vet was examining the hamster, he seemed totally fine. So she asked the little girl, was there anything that happened that might have caused this? And she said, well, a few days before this, the hamster actually escaped from its cage and we found it underneath the refrigerator. Sure enough, as the vet went on to examine the hamster, she found something in the hamster's cheek. Turns out while he was underneath the refrigerator, the hamster put a magnet in his cheek. And the reason he wasn't moving is because he was magnetized to the side of the cage for 3 days.